This is the Unstarving Musicians podcast. I'm your host, Rabonzo. This podcast features conversations with indie music artists and indie pros and me. It's all intended to help other artists be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Welcome to another episode. Thanks for letting me be in your earbuds or your ears or your speakers today. Hey, the Unstarving Musician is made possible through the generosity of listeners like you. If you love the podcast, please visit our sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the different ways that you can support the podcast. My guest is a lifelong singer, a frequent baker, a writer, with a passion for supporting the performing arts, skilled in script analysis, coverage, dramaturgy, that's a new word for me, and editing. Her name is Zoë Sonnenberg. She is with a PR firm called Sax Co. Most importantly for this podcast, she is a PR professional. Zoë represents music and other types of artists. She and I have worked together to book some of her clients on this podcast, including Danielle Eva Schwob in episode 147 and Evangeline Gentle, who was featured in episode 171. I encourage you to check those both out. They were great conversations. Zoë has been with the agency Sax & Co. More than 20 years. That's not right. I don't think that's right. I think I made a note here that Sax & Co.'s been around more than 20 years. But I don't know. Maybe she's been there 20 years. I forget. That's okay, though, for the point of our conversation. I don't know that matters that much. But it seems hard to believe she's pretty young. So Sax & Co. has offices in L.A., Nashville, and New York. They have an international reputation for working with exceptionally talented individuals and organizations. Their clients include musicians, filmmakers, film producers, theater companies, arts presenters, and entrepreneurial business ventures. So real quick, before we get to my convo with Zoë, you know that I am a big fan of Bandzoogle, the all-in-one, one-stop shop music platform for musicians and bands. You know this anyway if you've listened to more than one episode. At the end of this episode, I'm going to share with you how you can get a sweet deal that includes a free trial and a discount on your first year. But here's what I really wanted to say, why I brought them up here at this part of the podcast. Bandzoogle just announced that since March, artists have earned over $5.4 million in total revenue, commission-free, directly from their fans through their websites, their Bandzoogle websites. And that was selling music, merchandise, live stream tickets, subscriptions, sheet music, lyric, books, and more. Tips even. That's pretty dang cool. So stick around for a special offer at the end of this episode. So here's what Zoë and I talk about. We talk about how she got into the business, what PR firms do for their clients, including what she does for her clients, what she looks for in prospective clients, and she kind of just breaks down the client relationship. Super informative. Super nice person. Fun to talk to. Here is me and Zoë Sonnenberg. Are you in New York?
So right now I'm actually in Chicago. Normally I live in New York, but for the past few months, actually, I've been back in Chicago, which is where I grew up, staying with my family. So it's been, nice to reconvene, but I'm going back to New York next week. So
cool.
It'll be interesting to see what it's like back after having been gone for a little while.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, did you say you've not been back since, sorry, I'm trying to chew gum and listen at the same time.
No, no worries.
Did you say?
I haven't been back in a few months.
Oh, wow.
So I haven't been back since early March.
So
or mid-March.
Did you miss all the COVID drama there the in-person part?
I escaped right as the drama was sort of developing.
Yeah.
And it was a, pretty good combo moment of the, pandemic getting more intense and not knowing what that was going to look like, our office going remote, indefinitely, and my roommate saying she was going to go back to her family in California. And I was like, well, I guess I'll go too. Um, and, I'm like very grateful to have been able to spend this time with my family. And I think it was really nice in a lot of ways. It's also very surreal in others to be, an adult in your childhood bedroom again. But I'm grateful to have been able to be, to have been able to, escape, so to speak, in the first place, and then being able to come back is also something I'm excited about.
That's something else. I guess fairly early on, I spoke with an author and editor at Forbes that I'm a contributor there as of late, and he's been my guy for that. But anyway, he's been in New York for maybe all of it, but it was a trip. Talking to him about it all. Has work changed at all for you during all this COVID stuff?
Yes and no. In some ways, right at the beginning, it's certainly, having everybody be remote is a change. And just adjusting to doing all of your work from a laptop and setting up interviews and having meetings only via Zoom is, just like a different structure than we normally work. But I would say I've been pleasantly surprised that on the whole, like, business is still happening. I think, it's challenging in a world where suddenly live events aren't a thing.
And is that a huge part of the business for you?
A good part, I would say, because we work with mainly musicians, but also sort of performing artists more broadly. And, I have musician clients and also dance companies and presenting houses and arts, nonprofits and things. And so, sometimes we'll work for, a client's any project that they're doing. Sometimes it'll be one particular event. Sometimes it'll be an album release, etc. And so obviously things that were events all had to pivot or change. And some, we've been able to see do that really, really well. And some have just not been able to, some types of events can become like hybrids of an online, in person, some of we work with the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, who do a festival called River to River every summer.
Yeah.
And it's like an outdoor arts festival. And so they were able to make that still happen pretty miraculously, but, just a shifted version of what the initial concept of that was going to be. But because it's outside, they, stuck to mainly visual art pieces that people can go visit from a safe social distance.
Yeah.
And so, we're still able to have events like that, but, we'll do a lot of tour press, and touring is not really happening.
Yeah.
So a lot of our work with musicians is, album releases and things like that now.
Have you always worked have you worked exclusively with musicians in your time at Sax & Co?
No, I work with some musicians. I would say personally, I would work with about 2/3 musicians and 1/3 other arts groups more broadly.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm doing a little improvising since I'm trying the video today. I'm afraid to bring my notes up on screen as I normally do because I don't think I chose just you and me. But I know that I did want to ask you how it came to be that you were working with Sax & Co.
Totally. So I graduated from college in 2018.
From Stanford, I saw that.
From Stanford, I graduated from Stanford.
Nice.
And I knew that I wanted to work in arts and with particularly performing artists. And I was sort of on the hunt for a job that would allow me to be working with artists and also allow me to use my writing skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent about a year after graduation. I flew straight from graduating to New York. I was like, we're going to go do it. Like, now's the time. And I had grown up in Chicago, so I, knew how to live in a city. And I figured, if there's ever a time to go take yourself to New York, it's now. So I did that. And I spent about a year working various internships, mostly at theaters, and where I would work in their literary and artistic departments, which a lot of what I was doing was working with scripts, where I'd be sort of like reviewing scripts that came in and seeing, sort of helping the theater process those for consideration.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also doing a lot of part-time gigs and anything from, ushering to cat sitting to, like working for like a venue. Like I did a lot of various things, and was very fortunate that I was able to find the listing for the job I have now through a former member of the choir that I sing with in New York,
mm-hmm.
who sent out the listing to our, sort of wider choir community and said, a friend of mine is looking for someone to join their company. They do music and arts PR. Like, here's a description. And I was reading it and I was like, this is everything I want in a job. Like, this is the opportunity to work with really amazing artists, the opportunity to write every day, and the opportunity to be creative in a day-to-day setting.
Yeah.
And so I applied and ended up getting that job and have been there since.
How cool. So I want to back up and ask something that I wasn't planning to ask, but because you have a Bachelor of Arts in English and I know there was a minor in, forgive me because I don't have it in front of me anymore, but it's like theater and related
theater
stuff.
Performance studies, yeah.
Okay. I couldn't remember what it was called. What did your parents do for work?
My parents are both psychologists.
Okay.
My mom is a therapist. My dad does research for psychiatric medications.
Okay.
Yeah.
I ask. I have a not too dissimilar degree, and
nice.
but I was looking at you. I was actually looking at you on LinkedIn today.
Mm-hmm.
Sent you a connect request, by the way. And I'm like, I'm telling my wife, I'm like, oh, look at this. This gal has a BA and she went straight into her vocation. Look at that. And she's working for this great company.
Yeah.
And I was saying all this because I have a similar degree, been kind of fumbling about doing different things in my life. So, but I'll have a great, I'll have this great book someday of all the things I failed at and learned from.
I think it's also, I feel very grateful that I was able to get this job so quickly. On the other hand, in the year that I was working a lot of part-time jobs and internships and cobbling things together, I felt very panicked and was like, I'll never, will I ever have a career that is, stable in any grand sense? And I am very grateful that I thought the leading question was going to be, how do your parents feel about you working in arts? Because I get that question a lot. And I am very grateful that my parents are very supportive. I think in part they're supportive because I was able to be like, look, I got a job and I'm paid and it's real. Like, I swear. And they're like, great, that's awesome.
We knew you could do it.
Right. They're like, oh, cool. That was good proof. But also, I'm very grateful that my parents both love music. So they really understand the deep draw of that and the deep draw of working with artists and with musicians. And I am very lucky that they are, I say, able to understand that framework and that feeling. And I think loving music and seeing a lot of concerts and, being involved, like reading music press, things like that, like they know that it's a world that exists so they can see how the job fits into it.
Sure. I understand. That's cool. What did your bosses say, by the way, or your boss say about you coming onto the podcast to talk to me? I know that you were going to say, well, I don't know what the policy is, but let me check it out.
Yeah, they were totally happy with it. I figured, I had never been asked to be interviewed as a PR person, so I figured I ought to check. But they were totally down. They were like, how lovely, go,
nice.
Take the interview.
I'm happy.
Enjoy.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Me too.
I have another PR professional that has been threatening for months now to come on the podcast. Finally scheduled, and she's rescheduled, and she's rescheduled. So, but I think later this month, or maybe next. We're supposed to speak. But I thought, I talked to you a fair amount. I should see if
Yeah,
you'd come on.
perfect. Well, I'm happy to. And it's also, I could see how it'd be an interesting part of your podcast in particular, because it's all about sort of how do you make a career in this and what does that look like? And this is one corner of that larger universe.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've talked about interviews that you do. Is that, are those largely with clients are they discovery interviews, or what types of interviews are they?
I think I spoke unclearly. I don't tend to conduct interviews. A large part of my job is organizing interviews.
Okay.
So in any campaign, and certainly I do a lot of, Zoom calls and conversations and might be on with people while they're interviewing. One of the things that is like newly challenging in the Zoomness of it all is like, typically in the, before times, we'd set up an interview, we'd have people come into the office, we'd be there if they need anything, but you're not necessarily like having to be in the room with them. So you can sort of afford that privacy. You go like, you guys go take this office, like I'll be out here, let me know if you need anything, we can keep tabs on time, etc. But that's much harder to do virtually. So you either have to be like, I'm on mute in the corner, like just be silent, or, and it comes down to people's preference. And some clients and some interviewers want you in the room, some don't. So sometimes you just send a lot more emails being like, how'd it go?
We do a lot of that, right?
Right, exactly. I'm just like, yeah, like how was it? Like, you tell me. So I think, you find the way that works. But yeah, I don't do a lot of interviewing myself.
Okay. Yeah.
So to speak.
I misunderstood. I was smiling a lot as you were saying those things, because I was thinking, all right, I'm getting some young people speak here. You said Zoomness and you said before times, which I think I've heard before, but they just kind of made me laugh a little. So yeah. I was looking at Saxco's client list today. Quite impressive, by the way. And I kind of got a glimpse at one accidentally, because you had an autoresponder on while you were doing something. And I saw for inquiries about so-and-so. I'm like, what? Anyway, but anyway, I was looking at the larger client list today. It's very diverse, and the types of clients that you handle goes way outside of music, but all over the arts and technology and stuff too. And I just thought I'd throw that out there for people listening who maybe didn't listen to the intro, in which I'll probably say that much as well. But what do you and your coworkers, your team, look for in clients that are music artists?
Great question. I want to think about that for a second. What do we look for? Because in certain ways it's hard to articulate. You're looking for...
So let me, I'll just say, yeah, they have to have really killer music, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you prefer, if not expect, they have some sort of brand going on. But
yeah, typically, but we do take clients who, we have clients across the spectrum of, where they are in their career. Like, we work with people who are, coming out with their debut EP. And we also work with people who are, re-releasing REM's next, monster re-edition. And it's one of the things I really like about working at Sax is that I get to exercise a lot of parts of my brain on a lot of different types of projects. And it's something that I really admire about Carla, the woman who runs our company, is I think she's very good at pairing people to their project, because I think she knows her staff, and she can read into what the projects that she's being presented are, and can make really harmonious pairings, because there's an aspect to which, it's a social job. You're doing a lot of, interacting, and you have to be able to understand what it is that the client wants and what it is that the journalist needs and what it is that you have to do to get those two worlds on the same page. And Carla's really good at matching that process.
It's a great skill.
Yeah, it's an impressive skill. It's something I'm grateful to have the opportunity to keep watching and learning from. But to more broadly answer the question of what do we look for? I mean, I think, it is all of the things you mentioned, like great talent, great music, great, some sense of identity, if not necessarily to use the term brand, but it's not wrong per se. And then also, what it is, like, it's helpful to get words from the artist themselves so we know who they are as a person. We like getting to talk to somebody or getting to at least, speak with their team and know what is it that, like, it's one of my favorite parts of a campaign is at the beginning and we get to, have a call or have a meeting with the client themselves and get to hear in their own voice what it is they're trying to get out into the world. And then it's really helpful and exciting to be able to be like, okay, like, here's what you're telling me. Here's how I'm going to, like, process that information and then be able to share it with other people. And mostly you just have to find, you find things to get excited about. If we're not excited about something, it's hard to get other people excited about it, which is ultimately the crux of our job. So
yeah,
I'd say we take clients we're excited about.
Yeah, I guess that goes back to the age-old advice of look for people who believe in what you do to be around and support you. And part of that believing, I guess, is like you said, you get excited about what a client is doing. Do you find yourselves helping a client shape the story, the narrative, more so with some clients than with others? Because I assume you, as I started to ask, I assume you do that all the time, but are there some clients that really have it kind of dialed in? You're like, this is beautiful. I'm going to try and use as much of that as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Some people come in, I mean, it varies so much project to project. Some people come in with long histories of, whatever version of their story they're telling, and we sort of pick that up and keep running with it. Some people come in and, like I said, maybe it's their first, professionally produced EP, and they're like, you help me come up with what my story is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's come up with isn't even the right terminology because everybody has one. It's sort of about drawing out
sure.
what that story is in a way that people are going to hear well. I don't know if that made sense, but
I understand. It's like you're helping them develop. Sometimes you're helping them develop their story.
Exactly.
Refine
but
it, maybe.
It really varies project to project.
Yeah.
In terms of how much we do that.
Yeah. Well, I assumed, and it's good to know that it's not, I had these preconceptions in my mind that a lot of the stuff has to be figured out by the client before you even talk to them. But in your world, there's a lot of discovery, a lot of just figuring out how you adapt and work best with a particular client that you believe in.
Totally. So, exactly.
Yeah. For those that are thinking, people keep telling me I need to get some PR help. Mm-hmm. What would you tell to the novice, the total novice? What would you say to the question, what does a PR do for music artists? A PR rep do for music artists?
It's my party line is always, we are the conduit between the artist and the rest of the world. So we are there to help translate the vision of the artist who has something they want to share and has something they want to get out. And we're there to help sort of harness that and help get other people as excited as we are about a project. So we'll get, and it can be any kind of project at any phase, but PR is basically there to be a support network and to be someone who can, sort of help be a megaphone for the project. Sure. So that the artist can spend more of their time and energy being themselves and creating their work.
And I presume that they're, even in an ideal world, working with a company like Saxco, that there might still be some channels that an artist would behoove themselves to be familiar with for getting the word out, as you say. So I want to ask, what are the channels that you work with for your artist, like a music artist, for example? What are the channels that you try to help them hit, and where are some of the gaps that you try to help them understand that, they might need some we might need some outside help if we're working together on?
Yeah. So broadly, the channels are print, online, and broadcast. There are, and again, sort of how much we work within each of these depends on the project. Sometimes people will bring on a, separate person to do radio PR, or the label might have someone who does that, or, someone might have a social media manager, which is sort of a newer and different type of PR function. Like, we don't run anybody's social media for them, but sometimes we will suggest, like, retweet this, Pitchfork wrote an article about you, like, share that.
Yeah.
Or, we might help people set up Instagram live interviews or things like that. But broadly, it's, there are print outlets that are, New York Times, Rolling Stones, even, dance and art publications, things like that.
Sure.
There are online publications. The world of podcasts is sort of somewhere in between the broadcast and online worlds, because any podcast through NPR would be under broadcast, because often they're also broadcast on air.
Yeah.
Or at least sort of run through the NPR network.
Yeah.
And, we try to make sure that our clients get representation in all of those fields. And, we will also tailor to a project if there's, a particular interest that we're like, oh, so-and-so is a, young woman singer-songwriter, then we'll start hitting, like, outlets about young women singer-songwriters. There are a lot of interesting niches that we can, like, find spots for as well. And that, and those are often really good ways to get people as excited about a project as you are, because, they come into it with a predisposition to be excited about the type of artist you're bringing to them.
Sure. Do you have, speaking of podcasts being sort of in an in-between place, do you find any challenges in working with them in terms of, trying to get one to be responsive or to agree to have one of your clients on?
It totally depends. And I know that keeps being my party line, but it is true. A lot of this job is so project dependent. But, and it also depends on who you're working with. Like, I have found working with you to be very pleasant, and you're very responsive, and that's very helpful. And some people are not always as responsive. And then you're like, well, okay. I joke sometimes a part of my job feels like shouting into the void, because we're just like, okay, world, like, here's a new project. And you, like, shout it out there. And sometimes the void shouts back, and sometimes the void doesn't shout back. So you have to pivot and try a different corner of the void until eventually you do start getting the echo response,
Yeah.
And, but podcasts are also, and I will say, in the COVID era, it's really interesting to see how podcasts have become really instrumental, because it's a way that people can do interviews that inherently doesn't have to be in person.
Sure.
So, if you get two people and, we might suggest, like, hey, client, set yourself up in a nice corner of your room and, get a microphone if you have one, and set things up. So, you put your lighting, but otherwise, you're able to get to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And podcast audiences also tend to be really excited about what they hear, because much like tuning into a super, specific niche outlet on print or online, people are tuning in because they're like, I love Song Exploder, and I want to hear the breakdown of every, little part of this song, and I want to hear the artist talk about it. So you get an audience who's coming in already excited, which is also really nice. Yeah.
I actually was listening to a podcast about podcasting. That's not actually the theme of the podcast, but this episode happened to be.
Episode was?
Yeah. this episode happened to be an interview with a guy who has a podcast that's, I think he's like 700 episodes in. He started in 2017 and he's had really good success. He has a great marketing background, which was super instrumental. He kind of treated it like he would many other projects that he's worked on in the past, and it's worked well with him. But he just happened to, I guess a question came up about, getting contacted by PR people and others. And I remember possibly about the time that you and I connected, I felt like I was getting contacted by several all at once, or like getting a few hits. I'm like, what happened? I did, by the way, happen to hear him say that he'd gotten on some sort of bulletin board or something in this podcast. But it was interesting to me. He said that he didn't really enjoy working with PR people. There was one part about the layer in between his guest and him. Now he's done a really nice thing and developed some great relationships, such that he's getting so many referrals for guests. He's wisely, looked at his guests as one of his customers, which is a smart thing to do. But there was something else about the engagement I wish I could remember, and I thought to myself, well, that's not really how it's been for me. And I know he has to be an organized person because he's all about systems, because he's been in marketing and all this stuff. So I don't know, but yeah, I think I've dealt with 3 different, maybe 4 different agencies. I think the others outside of yours have been more on the boutique side. But the engagements that I've had, all with women, I think. I don't know if that in PR. Yeah, well, then that may say something too. The engagement's been about the engagement. It's been good. It's been organized, and everything. And I guess for people that are sort of listening from the indie artist perspective, and maybe you work with a PR person, or you are a PR person listening to this, and you're trying to figure out the whole getting to podcast. As an indie podcaster myself, for me, I confess, and I do it kind of publicly on my website, that I need help too. So I'm definitely giving higher consideration to people who have some certain things happening, like they have an online presence, a social presence. Definite bonus, not necessarily a showstopper. And then there is also this thing that I think everyone goes through, I assume, who's dealing in the world of music or arts, but something that I heard or saw just really got me excited the first time I saw it. And I've sort of just had this general rule, and I'm kind of just saying this for anyone who might listen to this, like, why hasn't he invited me on? I kind of have this general rule. If I have to sit and think about it for a few minutes, I kind of pass on it, often temporarily. So I have a nice system for bringing things back into my queue to just look at one more time. Yeah. But that's how it's been for me. But working with you, and I think I've worked with one other person from Saxco, and I'm forgetting who that is, but it's been a good experience for me. So if you're a podcaster.
I'm glad to hear. I think, and there's something interesting you mentioned about the, people's hesitation around PR folks because they sort of create a boundary between the journalist and the artist. And I think ideally, we work very hard not to be that person. And I think that, in great PR, it doesn't feel like there's a boundary. It just feels like it's someone who's able to make that connection for you and then allow that conversation to be a really genuine one between the journalist and the artist. And, the PR person is there if anybody needs help or needs extra questions, or, if the journalist is like, sorry, how do you spell their middle name? We can provide that information. Which in a lot of ways, ideally, unfetters the conversation, where they don't have to say, like, can you tell me how to spell your middle name? They can have a conversation about the work.
That's good to know, because it's good to know because I perceived it as a bit of a barrier, but in the sense that, we both want you to work through me, you in this case, on all these things that I'm clearly contacting you about. Please, it's sort of, to me, it's been tacitly implied that, we prefer you not go around me, but there's been a couple times, like I think it was you, or it could have been another PR person I was working with, where we had an artist that I sent a little thank you something to, and they're like, she wanted to know how you got her address, and I laughed and replied, was this you? And I said, she gave it to me because I asked for it. Right. And she'd forgotten, but so it's good to know, though. I have tried because of my perception, I've tried to be respectful of that. But I always have such a pleasant time with my guests, unless I was just having a hard time drawing out conversation, which I try not to put off entirely on my guests. Sometimes I know it's a little bit them and it's a lot me. It's kind of my job, right, to get them to be talkative. But so anyway, good to know.
There's an art to it.
For sure. And the other funny thing is I've been testing out a transcription service and working on a process for it to have a production assistant help me in the most efficient way possible. I kind of want to see how it worked. Yeah. And it is amazing when you're using a service that lets you listen to and read the words that are that were happening. You just hear it in a completely different light. So you call it an art. I know. I'm really guilty of saying things like, and I try not to let all that stuff get edited out for my own, feedback loop, if you will. Now I have a new production guy who I know is dying to get in there and just clean that all up and make me sound a little more pro. But it does make you wonder how well-spoken are all of these people that I hear. Are they professionally edited to such a degree that I don't really know?
Yeah. And it so differs project to project and like production company to production company, but it is so funny. I have also had opportunity to read transcripts and it's like, is that what I sound like? And then you look at it and you think, the way that people write and the way that people speak are two completely different cadences, two completely different tones, two completely different syntaxes.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are listening, likewise, when people speak the way that they write, it doesn't sound natural. It sounds scripted.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a happy medium, I think, to be found in the, allowing some of the likes and ums to stay and not having that be more than, you don't want the filler words to be more than the content.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of ums and and things like that in my
Sure.
podcast. Well, is there anything that we didn't talk about already that you could impart upon budding artists, or maybe artists that have a new project out? I don't know if it's common that they might, an artist with previous experience would struggle, and it may vary depending on how long of a gap in time they might have experienced from one project to another, how long they've been in the business. But do you have anything that you could share that might be helpful, inspirational, or encouraging otherwise?
Yeah, let me think of how to phrase what I want to say. The most important thing for an artist is that they believe in their work genuinely. You can tell when someone is creating a piece of art that they're crafting because they think it will sell. It doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't feel exciting. It feels sellable, so to speak, but not necessarily. But that's, it becomes its own worst enemy when people listen and they're like, cool, so this sounds like things I hear on the radio or, come up on top 100 lists, or, this will fit really squarely into, a Spotify insert genre playlist. But there is something about a really exciting record that you hear and somebody crafted that and put soul into it. And those are the types of projects that we like taking because you get really excited about that and you want to share that with people. And, certainly I will say from a PR perspective, it's helpful when artists are willing to talk about their work, just because, people don't, like, again, our job as PR is to bring the artists and the journalists together. They don't, with, I would say, maybe this exception, want to hear the PR person speak all that much. So your job is to be like, let me bring you to the artist. And when the artist likes speaking about their work, it's great because you get to be like, this person's a fun interview,
Mm-hmm.
So-and-so is interested in connecting with you. Because ultimately music is about connection. You're trying to put emotion into a vessel that other people will feel. And what more beautiful project in the world than that?
Yeah.
So,
I think that's wonderful advice, though. I'm not sure this really applies to everyone or necessarily everyone's situation when they're
mhm,
creating a new piece of art or a song or whatever. But
mhm.
my first thought as you started um, articulating was that perhaps one of the first things you can do is just forget about what everybody else is doing, and like all your peers.
Absolutely. Trying to fit yourself preemptively into some kind of box is never going to help you.
Mm.
Um, Other people will always do that work for you, regardless of whether you hire a PR company.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, that is human nature to try to fit people into categories.
yeah,
Doing that work before, it's like people talk a lot in to writers about turning off your self editor. Like don't edit yourself before you've created something. Create something and then, edit, refine, put it where it needs to be, help it elevate itself. But if you do that before your work is even completed, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
yeah, yeah. I can see that definitely, definitely. Let someone else help you
Yeah.
kill the parts that along the way that can go. That can go.
Exactly. And a beautiful, like, no piece of art ever comes out fully formed and ready to go on the first draft. No press release does. We have to do editing. It's a huge part of our job, and I think it's a huge part of any creative process.
Sure.
But shouldn't stop you from writing something in the first place, or something that feels genuine, and then you refine it to pull the best parts out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I agree. And okay, one more. I was thinking, what types of clients, what types of people do you personally like kind of fit into your niche? Do you personally enjoy working with the most? What are the things, characteristics that just resonate for you almost every time? Have you seen a pattern?
That is a good question. I don't know if I would pick a particular pattern. Um, I would say, I think because I come from a background in theater and music from like an educational standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
I think I tend to often get put with clients who have a lot of like musical training because we can, sort of speak in the same language about their work. Uh, but I wouldn't say that's a prerequisite, nor would I say that's true of all of my clients. Uh, but if I had to draw a pattern between like a large swath of them, it might be that. But that's personal. I mean, I think that's Carla trying to make, harmonious pairings and saying like, oh, you know how to speak this language, like so do these clients. They're going to be happy. You're like talking about their chord progression, and like you're going to be happy that they know how to have those conversations too. Like, but genuinely, I mean, not to sound like a broken record, but I think clients who are excited about their own work and who are excited to share it with people
Yeah.
make me excited. Like I am an inherently extroverted person. I like talking to people. I like, getting energized with other people. So when you're working with a client who's stoked about their project, it's really easy to get stoked about their project
Yeah.
and to really want to, shout about it from the rooftops and get people to talk about it with you and with them.
Yeah. I've seen this. My most recent firsthand up close experience with it was with an artist who I met through the podcast. His name's
Mm,
Johnny Bergen. He's a blues player, and he actually came to Panama predominantly to do a house concert with me. But
awesome.
we did some other things while he was here. But even before I met him in person, his passion for blues and what
Mm,
he's been doing is so real,
yeah.
and just it's beautiful when somebody's so excited about what they're doing, and not that it hasn't come without its frustrations. For sure, he's been
Sure.
doing it for a while, and
But it's infectious.
yes, it really is. It really, you feel like you're around someone special, when you get that
Exactly.
opportunity. So
Exactly. And there's something intangible about that everybody loves. It's charisma in part. It's,
yeah,
you know, appeal. It's a lot of things, but it's so exciting when you get that energy from someone and you're just like, I want to be wherever they are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Zoë, thank you for spending time with me. I hope that we continue the working relationship we've had. I've met some wonderful artists through you and have had some great episodes because of it. Always enjoy. It's nice to see you in person and feel like we're almost in the same room.
It's so good to put a name to a face.
Yeah. Well, tell the bosses I said thank you for, authorizing the appearance on the podcast. And
so thank you for having me on here. It's so nice to get to speak about what I do.
Thanks.
Take care.
You too. Ciao. This episode was powered by Bandzoogle, the easiest all-in-one professional website platform for musicians and bands. 2 things that will help ensure you're in control of your music business and your fan-based community are a website and an email list. Bandzoogle can help you do both. Plus, a solid website makes you look legitimate. Serious musicians, singers, songwriters, composers, and performers know this to be true. If you don't yet have your own website, check out Bandzoogle. It was created by musicians for musicians. I use it and I love it. It's as easy to use gets, and you don't have to worry about plugin updates and security patches. Bandzoogle takes care of all that for you. The features and support are both incredible. See for yourself. Go to bandzoogle.com to start a 30-day free trial and use the promo code ROBONZO to get 15% off your first year. Plans start at just $8.29 a month. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to start your free trial today. This episode was powered by ConvertKit. I have been a ConvertKit user since early 2016, and I really love it for the email marketing aspects of what I do. It's more than just an email marketing company, though. They are focused on landing pages, too, giving beginner creators everything they need to start building their email lists. Their new free plan allows creators to make unlimited landing pages and forms, and you can choose from multiple templates, personalize them with design, include an incentive email, create a thank you page, manage all your subscribers, and of course send broadcast emails. The support is great, and that is important to me. To learn how ConvertKit can help you connect with your audience so that you can make a living doing work you love, go to unstarvingmusician.com/convert or the show notes for this episode. Did you know you can help other independent artists find this podcast by subscribing on Apple Podcast or wherever you are listening to your podcast these days? It really does help, so I hope you will consider it. And if you have feedback, please go to unstarvingmusician.com to get all my contact info. You can text me, call me, email me, leave a voice message right there on that page. Just go down to the bottom of the page and you'll find everything you need to know. I really would love to hear any of your comments, suggestions, questions, whatever you've got. And you can find links to just about everything talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. All right, I'm peacing out. Thank you for listening and sharing with your musician friends and fellow indie music fans. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.